Hi everybody, welcome to the Facebook group Python for Beginners. I set this group up to help connect newbies to Python, deal with similar problems, or even collaborate on projects together, because I believe the best way to learn is to actually work on something. I think it's also good to challenge yourself as well. So if you see a question in the group that you might be able to help with, feel free to try and help the fellow member. I'm Pav Sharma and I'm a Python tutor and a Python developer. But I'll let you in a secret. I've never actually studied computer science at an academic level. In fact, I come from the legal industry. I taught myself how to code in Python, and I prefer to take a plain English, no IT jargon approach to learning. Today, I'd like to talk you through a very simple Python project which will allow us to track the real-time air quality index of most cities in the world. So we'll be able to do this by using Python variables, dealing with APIs, using Python dictionaries, Python lists, Python and Python functions. By the end of this quickfire tutorial, you will gain some understanding, and I'll also share the code for this in a link below. So with that said, let's get started. Okay, so just for a little bit of background, there's a couple of things you need to do to get your project started. The first thing to do is install the requests module using pip install requests. Now, this is one of the reasons why I love Python, because installing a module into Python or a library which extends the functionality of Python is super easy. All you need to do is go to the terminal and type in pip install requests. If you need more information on how to do this, please leave a comment below and one of us will be able to help you with that. The second thing you need to do is apply for a free API key from the World Air Quality Index organization. So if you check their website out, you can see that they that they make available data for most cities in the world. But what we're going to do in Python is automate the process of retrieving that information. So if we take a quick look, we can see some of the cities which have a good air quality index and some where is worryingly unhealthy. A lot of the cities in India, for example, is sadly very polluted. Okay, Australia is looking good at the moment. Okay, so once you apply for a free API key from the World Air Quality Index organization, they will send you an email, and it might take about 10 minutes to arrive. It took me a while to get that email, and in that email, they're going to give you an example endpoint. When you go to the example endpoint, it's just a URL. The response you should get in your internet browser will look something like this. Okay, now it seems like a lot of data, it seems very complicated, but it's actually structured data in a really efficient way, and the format is called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. There's a website, or there's many websites called JSON formatters, and you can actually take your example endpoint just to visualize it in more of a human readable way. So if you see what's going on here, we've got a dictionary. Within the dictionary, we've got two key value pairs. That's a key, that's a value, that's a key. And the value of data is another dictionary. So if we open that, we can see some interesting information. For the purposes of this quick tutorial, I'm only interested in the air quality index. Okay, so it's good for me to visualize this now, because later on I'm going to need to know how to access the AQI. So back to our code. The first thing you want to do is import the requests module. Okay. Oops. And straight away I've got a typo. And this is another thing why Python is great, because it tells you where the error is. It's pinpointing where the error is, so where I need to look. So I'm just going to get rid of the S. The requests module will allow us to effectively use Python like an internet browser. So in the same way I've used Chrome to access this endpoint, I'm going to be able to make a request to this endpoint within the realms of my Python code. So the next thing we want to do is define a URL, and the URL is just going to be our endpoint. Okay. So there's just one thing we can change about this URL. In fact, there's two things. The first one is it's hard-coded to always report for Beijing. The second thing is the API key is always in the hyperlink as well. I think we should separate them. The first reason is so we can put in any city we like. The second reason is, once we've done our script, we may want to give our application to a friend or publish it as part of an open source project. What you don't want to do is also give your own API key, which is this. So by putting it into a variable, you could make it very easy for the next person who's going to use your code to simply add in their API key. So let's do that now. Let's create a variable called city name, and I'm just going to change that to London. And then let's create a API key, and I'm just going to set that to my own API key there. Now, in order to make these variables appear within the URL or the string that we have here, we need to convert this to a formatted string, and that's super easy. You just need to put the letter F there, and then you can go in and then put in your variables. Fantastic. Right, so the next step is, we're almost there, is to use the request module that we installed earlier to make a request to the World Air Quality Index Organization to ask them to send back the information that we are interested in. So to do that, I'm going to create a variable called response is equal to the requests module dot get, and then open parentheses, and then I'm going to pass in the URL. So what we're doing here is, we've got the request module, we're creating an instance of it or an object of it within Python, and behind the scenes within this module there's a function called get, and like the name says, that will allow us to make a get request to this website using our API key, and you will hopefully return the information we're interested in. So we can test that to see what code it returns, and it's returned code 200. So whenever you're doing this, you want to first test if you're able to make a successful get request, and if you can, you will get response code 200. But we are only interested in this JSON information, so we can create another variable called JSON_data, set that to response again, but this time, the end of it, we can put .json, open parentheses, closed parentheses. So we are invoking a JSON method that's available to us, and all that is saying is, from the entire response that we're getting, even though there's other information and data that we can't see when we go to it in a web browser, we only want the JSON information returned to us. So if I test that now, great, so it's given me all the information we can see in there, just what I need. So I'm only interested in AQI, so I'm going to create a new variable called AQI. I'm going to set that to JSON data, and now I need to use Python. I need to treat this as a Python dictionary, and first access the value for data, and then access the value for AQI. So that's going to give me the value of this, which is everything down there. And then we do another one to say, once we've got within this value, we want the next key, which is AQI. Great, now that works. It's got rid of all the information I don't need, and it's only extracted the information that I'm interested in. So the next thing we can do, we can package this script up as a Python function. A Python function is just a reusable piece of code which will only run when it's called. So to do that, I'm going to type in def, and that's short for define, and I'm going to call my function AQI checker, and I'm going to pass through a parameter called city name, and then I'm going to indent everything in here. Now in Python, indentations are very important, and all we are saying with this indentation is everything that's indented underneath our definition statement will apply to that function. Okay, then the last thing we want to do is return what we want the function to return. So I'm going to get it to return a sentence, and I'm going to say the AQI in city name is AQI. Okay, and just another thing we can do, we can get rid of this city name now, because that will be derived by whatever argument is passed through when the user calls the function. Oh, just got one error there. I'd put in an extra quotation, and you can see Python has done a great job again of telling us what the error is. If we hit enter, great. So now to call this function, I can simply type in the function name, and this time I can pass through a argument and I'm going to call it New Delhi. And okay, it's given me an error, and the reason for that is silly mistake. I've done AQI in uppercase, so let's just lower that again. And we can try this again. There you go. Wow. The AQI in Delhi is 519, very polluted place, and we need to do something about that. Another thing we can do, we can create a list of cities. So I'm going to say London, New Delhi, New York, and I know Singapore. And then we can now loop through this list of cities just by typing in for city in cities. Let's call the AQI checker. But rather than manually typing in the name of the city, we can just put this variable called city in here. And what this for loop is doing is going through each one of these cities and assigning it the name city each time it's looping through each one. And I'm just going to put print there so to make sure it prints for demonstration purposes. And there you go. It's automated the process of collecting information of each one of these cities using Python, using the World Air Quality Index API and the and our Python function that we've built. I hope you found that to be useful. I know it was super rushed. I've done this in one take as well, so it's natural that there are mistakes. But I hope that gave you an insight of how quick you can do things in Python, how you can deal with APIs, how to respond when you see an error. If you've got any questions or got any suggestions of what we could do next, perhaps we could build a web application around this, or we could do a data science project, then please leave a comment below. Thank you for your time for tuning in on this, and I hope to chat to you soon.